Welcome to the There She Goes podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Rowland, and I'm so excited to have you here on this journey together. So for our first podcast today, I thought I'd tell you a little bit more about me, my background, so you understand who I am, where I'm coming from, and share with you a little bit about what you can expect from this podcast. So just to jump right in, I'm a licensed acupuncturist and Chinese medicine practitioner. I practice in person locally in New York City and remotely worldwide. I have a master's in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And then on top of that, I have hundreds of hours in continuing education in things like classical acupuncture, Chinese medicine nutrition, gynecological acupuncture and Chinese medicine, pediatric acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and so much more. I have two kids who at the time of this podcast are aged 4 and 6. And I have a cat and a husband who my cat may show up as a guest star at any point during this recording. So I practice acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and I live by acupuncture and Chinese medicine, but I didn't always. So I think it's important to understand my background and where I'm coming from. So I grew up in New Jersey to a family that was very much focused on Western medicine. If we got sick, we'd go to the doctor, we'd listen to the doctor, we'd take whatever medication they told us to, and that was it. Doctors' words were like God, essentially. I remember growing up, I'd get a ton of ear infections. I was a swimmer when I was younger from about age 8 to 13, and I would get so much swimmer's ear, and I would just take so many antibiotics. And I think by the end, they weren't even really doing anything, but I would just take them anyways. So that's kind of the situation I grew up in. And it wasn't until the first time I remember actually questioning Western medicine and what I was told by a doctor is when I was 17. So I had gotten my period regularly from age, 12 to 17. And then my period started to be irregular, meaning I was getting it only every 4 to 6 months. So my mom took me to the gynecologist, and the gynecologist, without doing many tests to my knowledge, I don't remember having really any exam besides a typical gynecological exam done or any blood work. Basically, just told me I had to go on birth control to regulate my period. And I wasn't sexually active at the time, so it seemed a little bit off to me. And I just said, thank you. And I just never ended up filling the prescription or taking the birth control. Fast forward to a year later, I go back to the same gynecologist and I basically get yelled at. I get shamed for not taking the birth control, being told that I'm being dangerous to my health, that I'm putting myself at risk for osteoporosis at 18. And it freaked me out and it scared me. So I listened to the doctor and I took the birth control, and I stayed on that birth control until I was about 30 and wanted to get pregnant. Now, I'll go into my fertility story at a different point, but all of this is just to say that something felt off, but I didn't listen to my intuition, partially because I didn't know better. I went to FIT in the city and I studied marketing, and then I just went straight into marketing after school. It was never what I wanted to do, but I always thought I just needed to do something that made good money, and it seemed easy, honestly. So in my 20s, I worked in marketing. I basically did what every 20-year-old does, which is work yourself too hard and not nourish your body. So I was probably under eating, over drinking, over exercising, taking a pill to solve all of my problems. And the truth is I was dealing with a lot of physical pain. I had debilitating period cramps, which my gynecologist put me on a birth control that you only get your period every couple of months to help with that because they had no other solution. I was given no other options. I had insomnia since I was young, so I was basically addicted to Ambien. And I had a lot of physical pain from exercise. But the physical pain is actually how I found exercise. So let's talk about that. So I never grew up running. I hated running. I remember being in middle school and high school and having to do that mile run, wanting to throw up. But in my mid-20s, I decided, hey, let's pick up a new activity. And I think my roommate was running a half marathon. So I figured I'll do it too, having never run probably more than a mile in my entire life. So I trained for the half marathon. I ran the half marathon. I loved it. I got such a high from running that it just became part of my life. So I started training for more half marathons. And then eventually I wanted to run the New York City Marathon. That was like my major goal and dream. So I think I joined through a charity because it's really hard to get in through lottery to New York City Marathon. And obviously I'm not going to get in through racing. So I joined a charity to do the New York City Marathon, and I was training, and somewhere around, like 15 to 20 miles, I ended up injuring myself. I was overdoing it, over exercising, over running, and not taking care of my body. Now, this was definitely not my first injury, but it was the one that really took my body down. So I injured my IT band, which is connective tissue that goes from your hip down to your knee. And I felt it in my knee. Like I could barely bend my knee. It hurt to walk upstairs. It hurt to walk in general. So I obviously definitely couldn't run. And I live in New York City, so I had a ton of resources to me. I went to one of the top orthopedic doctors in New York City who works with a lot of the marathon runners. I went to top physical therapists, massage therapists, all of that, and nothing helped it. I tried a cortisone shot at one point and it did help it for about a month. And then I was back to 0.0 and being in excruciating pain. And it was at this point where, like obviously I wanted to run, but that wasn't even the goal. I just wanted to be able to walk without pain, to be able to even just go down the subway steps, not being in pain. So I was referred to a massage therapist, and this massage therapist told me, you should try acupuncture. Now, I had tried acupuncture once in the past, probably a few years prior for insomnia, for sleep issues. And it was such a scary experience to me. Just briefly to explain it to you, it was in Union Square. Anyone who's familiar with New York City knows there's a lot of like old dingy buildings. And it was one of those old dingy buildings with an old dingy office, which is not unusual in New York City, but kind of still throws you off when you're going in for like healthcare and having needles stuck in you. Anyways, I went to an acupuncturist who had really good reviews on like Yelp and Google. And I went in. I, briefly told him about what was going on. He stuck some needles in my head, I think my feet, left me in a pitch black room, and honestly, like didn't really say anything. So I'm sitting there in a pitch black, strange looking room with needles in my head and my feet, thinking like, oh my God, am I about to be murdered? Like, honestly, I've never been afraid of needles. It wasn't the needles that scared me. It was the lack of communication and understanding of what was going on and what was happening, which just like to sidetrack, which is why I always try to keep that in mind when I have new patients and the way I set up my office so that people never feel that way. Anyways, fast forward, I was like, I don't really want to do another acupuncturist. I've tried so much. I've spent so much money on this fucking injury. The last thing I want to do is spend more. And, a lot of acupuncturists, at least at the time, were out of pocket. You didn't take insurance. Anyways, I looked up this acupuncturist. And they were previously a physical therapist. So they were a physical therapist and an acupuncturist. I was like, I get Western medicine. I'll try it. So I went to acupuncture and it was a much better experience, much friendlier, much more explanation, much cleaner environment. And after one session, I felt 80% better. And after 3 sessions, I could run again. And so I was hooked. And I kept coming back for other things like the insomnia I mentioned and shoulder pain that I had for most of my probably teen and adult life, which sidetrack, I actually can't remember the last time I actually had shoulder pain. I haven't felt it since I found acupuncture in my mid-20s. Anyways, I kept going back. And I always knew I wanted to do something in health and wellness. I knew marketing wasn't my lifelong goal. It was my, for now, career that made me money. But I always knew I wanted to do something in health and wellness. I just didn't know what. I thought about going back to school to be a dietitian or a nutritionist, but it just didn't feel like enough for me. I've always been a physical person. I grew up as a swimmer and a dancer and constantly playing sports. And I love moving my body. I love feeling things. And there's just something about acupuncture that spoke to me. So after a couple of months of getting acupuncture, I decided I was going to go back to school. I should probably mention at this point that I'm an Aries. So if you know anything about astrology, when I make a decision, I just go for it. So I applied for acupuncture school. At the time, there was only 2 in New York City. Now there's only 1. And I went with the one that kind of just felt easiest to me. So I got into acupuncture school. Honestly, I have no idea how I was actually going to pay for it. I've always been good at savings, but me and my fiance at the time, now husband, had just bought an apartment. So I didn't have a ton of extra money in the bank. But within a few weeks after being accepted into acupuncture school and accepting my placement, money honestly just kind of fell out of the sky, which might sound crazy, but if you know or believe anything about the universe and manifesting, when things are meant to be and meant to line up, things just happen. And I just knew that this was meant to be for me. I get emotional, honestly, even talking about it. But anyways, money that I did not expect to get just kind of came to me. A company I had previously worked for sold to a bigger company and I had some stocks in it, which I had not bought. And I had 1 day left to accept my options. So I did, and I got that money. And then I got a bonus from the job I was currently in, which was extremely surprising, not just because I wasn't doing a great job, but because the division of my company was also not doing a great job. So it really was not expected. And that paid for like 75% of my master's in Chinese medicine and acupuncture. So to be completely honest with you guys, I went to acupuncture school and got into acupuncture planning to be this amazing sports therapy acupuncturist. And quite honestly, I am an amazing sports therapy acupuncturist, but my vision changed the more I learned about acupuncture and Chinese medicine and how it wasn't really a westernized medicine the way a lot of people practice it, but it was really this beautiful, deep, ancient medicine healing capacity that I hadn't even understood yet. So I'm going to save my fertility story for another time, but just kind of to add some background to it, when I was in my last year of acupuncture school, I think I was 30. I was married at that time, and we decided we wanted to start trying to have a family. So I went off birth control, and I wasn't able to get my period back. And it was that process of trying to get pregnant and going through the fertility journey that really catapulted me into wanting to focus on fertility and women's health. A year and a half to get my period back after going off birth control. And through that journey, I really understood and learned what things work and don't work for women and how to handle such a sensitive area of women's lives. And it just became such a strong passion of mine. And it's that experience that really changed my vision of who I wanted to be as a practitioner and what I wanted to practice, essentially. After graduating and being licensed, I started practicing right away. And then for the most part, I was practicing TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, to start with. And I practiced it for a couple of years. And then I just realized I wasn't loving it. Like, it just wasn't feeling good to me. Yeah, I was getting results. I was having patients, but it just didn't feel right to me. Like, so most schools, most colleges in the US for acupuncture are TCM based, traditional Chinese medicine. And what we are taught is that we can't treat things like autoimmune conditions, cancer, colitis, really serious things that we are not able to do. We can help the symptoms, but we can't cure them. And that just didn't make sense to me. I figured, like, if an ancient medicine, 3,000 years old, still being practiced, can't heal these things, then like we're all fucked, right? So then I started studying with one of my mentors, Anne Cecil Sturman, and I realized that that's all wrong. It's just that TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, can't solve those problems, but classical acupuncture, which is the original acupuncture, can. So just to give a brief history, very brief, you can look on my social media to find out more. TCM is actually modernized acupuncture that was developed in the 1950s. And in doing so, they took out a lot of the channels and methods in classical acupuncture and Chinese medicine that allow the body to heal naturally, that allow us to treat all conditions. So I started diving into practicing classical acupuncture, and that's when I really renewed my passion for the medicine, the connection it has to our energy, to our spiritual selves, to our bodies and our minds. And that is what still drives me in my practice today. So that's a little background about me and who I am. And you can always email me or message me questions. I love to answer them. But let's dive into a little bit about what this podcast is about and what it's meant to be. So chapter 1 of the Suen, which is a classical Chinese acupuncture text, one of the first written texts, in chapter 1, it says that all diseases start in the mind. And this honestly includes all diseases. In acupuncture and Chinese medicine, it's a Taoist medicine. We don't really believe in accidents. We believe in faith and the energy lining up for things to happen. But accidents don't necessarily happen. I don't really believe that anything is a true accident. So my main goal of this podcast is to help you understand how your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions, your past experiences, and the trauma that's connected to our body and our energetic self is creating the ailments and things that are happening in your life today, both physically and mentally. How your core beliefs are creating your physical, emotional, and mental reality. I want to teach you the mind-body connection, but from a very unique perspective of classical Chinese medicine and Chinese acupuncture. And I find that Chinese medicine's perspective on the mind-body connection is so much more interesting and so much deeper because we understand how disease enters the body through our minds and through our emotions. And we also understand the intricate network of how to reverse that. which for the most part, honestly, is not just saying affirmations over and over again. It's connecting with the energetics of your physical body and really deep healing from the inside out. I also want to share with you more about other mind-body modalities and what other people are doing in this space and this industry, because as much as I love Chinese medicine, and I think everyone should love Chinese medicine and explore Chinese medicine, it's not the only healing modality out there. And I think it's important that you know other things and find what works best for you. Lastly, and what I am most excited about is that we're going to have guests on the show who are just people like you and me with certain ailments, women's health conditions going on, who want to solve their problems naturally and energetically. And so we will have them talk through what is going on in their lives, in their bodies, and you will see live firsthand, not only how I work, but how our emotions and our beliefs are connected to our body. If you are interested in coming on as one of my guests, please email me or DM me on my social media, which we will link in the show notes. So that's it for today. Thank you for starting this journey with me, and I'm excited to explore more about Chinese medicine and the mind-body energetics with you.